it changed how we did business. Now we have more entrepreneurs than we can even imagine, because it seems like everybody and their granddaughter or grandmother is about to set up a business because you need to survive.
This is Advertising in Africa with Dele Udugbemi on Africa Business Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Advertising in Africa with me, Dele Udugbemi. Today I have a friend, a person I've come to know in a couple of assignments we've done over the years, Adepoju Bakare, who I'll let introduce himself. But the reason I felt he was a very good person to talk about today's topic, which is about the impact of the pandemic in Nigeria, is because he has a broad perspective, and it's not maybe I consider him an expert in one particular area. I think his worldview is really what my interest is. And on that note, I'd like to welcome Adepoju to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
So if you could please just give the audience like a bit of your background, just so that they could put what you have to say in context.
Okay. My name is Adepoju, like I said. Before now, I currently run my own marketing agency targeting basically tech startups and social impact organizations called Beyond the Visual. Prior to then, I've worked with Noah's Communication as an associate digital director, set up the Red Wolf company there as well, which is Noah's digital agency. Worked with a couple of other agencies like Aqua Online from South Africa and consulted for Metropolitan Republic from South Africa as well. Worked on accounts like MTN, Lenovo, Showmax. It's been a joyride, mostly focusing on strategy, business design, creative concept development.
Right. I felt it was important to drag you here to talk about what has impacted, well, the globe, a pandemic, but more from the point of view of its impact on the Nigerian advertising industry. So if we could start with the pandemic in itself, the surprise, and like everybody always talk about it like a surprise, like it was supposed to give us notice. Just how you've looked at it in terms of how it's impacted our lives, and then maybe we could then go specific to the impact in Nigeria.
I think it's funny how we think about the pandemic, because it was both a good thing and also definitely a bad thing. I mean, lives were lost. We can't put that into any better context than the fact that human lives were lost.
Absolutely.
But it also forced us to rethink how we were living as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, things that we took for granted before started making some sense to us. Even the world itself had healed from it. The skies were clearer again, the oceans were much more bluer, and the rest of them. But it also made us start to rethink how we saw things such as work, we saw things such as play, and it changed perception for a lot of people, for a lot of things. And it changed how we did business. Now we have more entrepreneurs than we can even imagine, because it seems like everybody and their granddaughter or grandmother is about to set up a business because you need to survive. And I think that impact also was felt not just in Nigeria, but everywhere in the world. We couldn't see ourselves as often. We've now developed new habits. We don't shake people. We give fist bumps. But the outcome of it is it's giving us a chance to rethink how we live as human beings, and then see how we get prepared for maybe the next 5-10 years, what another pandemic, if it's likely to come into the world, will be. We're better prepared for it as people, and we know how to tackle it.
The Nigerian story is one where we thankfully don't have a terrible story to tell.
So far.
Before, the anticipation was given, our state of public health and all of that. There was an anticipation that it would hit us terribly. Mm-hmm. It hasn't, as far as hospitalization numbers are, to be taken into seriousness.
Okay.
So, given that we were kind of like playing the global game and shutting down and all of that a lot of the early part of last year, and somehow it became obvious we couldn't afford it, and we learned to live with the disease. I think we've done that a lot faster than maybe most other countries that have been fortunate to travel to during this pandemic. So what is your take in terms of how that has affected advertising in Nigeria, given our shutdown was not complete? We did, but not long after we did, we were able to, let's say, like have an industry that kind of almost recovered, or is in the recovering phase right after. What's your take on that?
I think the most interesting thing about the pandemic in Nigeria and its impact on advertising was how it, like you said, we're in the recovering phase. So how it has impacted us mostly comes mostly from the standpoint of how businesses are rethinking the concept of advertising as a business. 2020 came, and with the pandemic, it turned things on its head big time. Brands were thinking about how or what was required when it came to communicating to customers. And so we had a lot of trends that started springing up, like agencies losing clientele because the clients couldn't also put forth marketing budget. Marketing budget was then diverted towards CSR opportunities, like providing funding for the what's the call now, for the frontline healthcare workers and the rest of them. And so our communication took a different turn. Then even us, the customers, we were indoors, we were stuck. And so our mobile phones and our gadgets became our lives. Then we then had the impact of things such as House Party and TikTok. And so because of channels and platforms such as that, which was more interactive, content driven, agencies and brands alike had to think, where are the customers? What are they doing? What content are they consuming? And how do we then serve them those content? So we saw the rise of TikTok. We saw the rise of Clubhouse. We saw Twitter before the shutdown of Twitter take a different vibe.
Let's not go there.
Take a different vibe entirely. We saw Instagram, especially the Instagram live videos, and the rest of them became big. And so I think the first approach by most businesses was to think of advertising from a digital marketing standpoint. A lot of agencies tried to build their model around that phase, because it was like, if the client wants us to communicate to people using digital, then let us rethink our business as a digital business. However, some agencies had that capability, some agencies didn't have the capability. So mostly we saw clients started to in-house some creative resource and even digital resource as well. And since we were all working from home anyways, we got to learn how to manage our time better and become more productive. It had a big negative impact on the industry, just like you rightly said. But the future so far that we're beginning to see is businesses are forced to rethink how we connect with clients. It's no longer about just creative content production, which I think for a long time, that's what we've been doing within the industry. We get a brief, we create content, we put one or two celebrities there, and boom, we sell. Formula, yeah. But now there's more emphasis on, I need to hit certain targets. Client knows that if I want to target the Gen Z, for example, it is not just to give them a product that excites them, but a product that solves an immediate problem in their lives. Whether it's a fintech product or whether it's an agri-tech product, whatever it is. And then they had quantifiable numbers are now put on the table. It is not about, I want 10 million impressions or views. It is about, does it translate to sales? And so we've seen agencies starting to rethink their business model. How do we drive value to the client? And that is making us see new businesses come into the market. And look, thankfully, the community itself, that's the advertising community, is beginning to accept these new agencies that are coming on board, learning from them and using that to rethink how we target clients and how we connect with our customers over time. I think it will get better because we've now seen that, if anything, the person that is most important in the equation is the customer. If it determines that he wants content on TikTok, we have to find a way to serve him that content without it feeling like an advertising-based content. It has to feel as organic as possible. And so we are seeing new creative thinking come into play, new targeting and media planning done better. We are seeing solutions being provided by the agencies. It's a long way to go because if you've been used to a traditional way of doing something, you might find it difficult to adjust. But I think that over time, the more consumer demand changes, the more clients' needs evolve, we as practitioners will have to find a way to become better in our service delivery as well.
One of the things I've picked on in the last 2 years, and it's been a trend, it's been in our faces for a while, which is branded content. We've had it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. As the platform had gotten more personal, the ability to reach a community with a certain type of messaging that is personalized in some way became possible. And then it then started as a trend, premium stuff for Bobrisky on Snapchat or whatever it is. So that branded content is a trend we had been living with without it necessarily being formalized. But you find that in the last 2 years, that because the pandemic had kind of, as you pointed out, made us be home, and then consumption patterns shifted in that period. Therefore, you kind of needed to preach branded content to certain clients before, but in us being home, being able to take in longer form of content than we had the penchant for when we were a lot busier, then now made branded content almost like a natural fit. And then, in my view, it became more enhanced, where I look at some of them and I'll be like, this is a drama group.
Exactly.
This is what a drama group used to be when they kind of used to move from village to village. To entertain the villagers on something they have.
Exactly. It's interesting because it's even evolving now beyond that. So we're now in that era of, like you said, before now we thought of branded content as influencer marketing type. But now it's more personal. It's more co-branded content. It's the customer connecting with the client or the brand and co-creating content together for them.
What's the future of that? Because as you said, certain things that impact the traditional advertising model that in the last 2 years or so that it more than likely wouldn't ever really be the same again, because you know the thing about Nigeria is once something is discovered, it tends to grow
like that,
grow legs as they call it. So that all of a sudden the commercial advertising industry, in my view, is now being impacted by that, because that what is being spent in that direction is what traditionally used to lead to sports and all that. So what's your view about how that, because at the moment I say it's a bit unstructured, it's evolving, it gets better. I see some sketches and I'm like, they're taking it higher, I'm assuming, as the briefs are getting better and tighter. What can that evolve into?
There are two ways I see it. There's the learning phase, which I think we're mostly in at this point, where we're trying to make better use of the kind of branded content we're creating. And a lot of advertising professionals are having to study what your Debo Macaronis, your Taoma are creating organic content that it's, the minute it feels branded, the customer suddenly pulls back. But the minute it doesn't feel like that, the customer connects to it. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of A/B testing going within different businesses. And I think we'll also get to the second phase where I see more of a perfection phase. So what's beginning to happen, and it's exciting. A friend and colleague of ours, Franklin Ozekume, he's founder of Think Africa, and he set up a business which is based around Pop Culture Academy. So it's called B School. And his approach is targeting advertising practitioners, influencers and all that, trying to, even the business owners, trying to help them perfect how to use pop culture trends to create better branded content that relates with the customers, right? I think we'll get better with it. I consume YouTube a lot. And there are basically things that I watch on YouTube, finance, sports, and the rest of them. One of them is video gaming. I watch people play video game, and I'm sitting there and watching them. And it's
don't worry, I'm not going to judge you.
And it's surprising how most of the guys that I watch their content have been sponsored by one brand or the other, whether it's a football app or a betting app or something. And the way they connect the content to the ad doesn't feel like you're listening to an ad material. So I think we will get better with it. I think that over time, we will also have to learn, like you rightly said, what type and kind of content best suits a channel or a platform. Whoever thought that we will sit down and watch 1 hour, 1.5 hours or 30 minutes of content on YouTube before now. But now we find ourselves inclined to quickly do that. So it means that from our standpoint, we have to do a lot more pop culture analysis. Understand the cultural context of how people consume these kind of content and the kind of content they consume. What excites people? And maybe even bring that audience into the mix. The reason why most tech companies do better than us within the advertising spaces, the customer is factored in from the point of product design to the point of launch. If we can carry the customer along, know what he or she prefers, know how he or she wants to receive content, and even co-create that content with them, becomes a better thing to do. Gone are the days when Old Spice ads were people sending in their own version of how they think the ad should be, and Old Spice recreating those kind of ads. We're getting back to that era because digital makes it easy.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to travel a bit even over this pandemic.
Yeah.
And also because of the contacts I have, I get content from just about everywhere because usually as I travel, I try to make my Instagram local.
To wherever you are.
To wherever I am.
Yeah.
And then as you travel a lot, then it builds, which means then you get South African content, you get Ghanaian content, you get, so I've been kind of fortunate to be able to see that. And what I've been quite impressed with has been that the Nigerian content, you could see there's a Hollywood industry right next door to it. It is still bite-sized content, of some would seem shot over a mobile phone, maybe some a lot more organized, but that you would see there's an attempt to put structure, whereas when I see effort from elsewhere, it still looks a bit amateurish, and I think despite it being user-generated content, it's just being elevated, and so that's the impact Hollywood has had. And I've been also of late quite impressed, taking it from like TikTok, as you had mentioned earlier, the impact Nigerian music has had globally. CK and Love Wantinte and the 15 billion TikTok hit. I read that and that was okay, but there is a show I watch, Stephen Colbert's, kind of like, he's an American comedian who was a late night show, The Late Night with Stephen Colbert, who was talking about a TikTok clip from one of the Secret Service agent to Biden. He was seen around and people thought it was hot, and then people wanted to have a TikTok thing about it, and they used the Love Wantinte clip for it. And he didn't just show that on the show, but also played it to show even maybe it was hotter than the guy. He played exactly the same song. So I was watching an American show. He was talking about an American, and the song he was playing to show how hot the guy was Love Wantinte. And that's how we had adopted their culture without seemingly knowing. And then I find over the last couple of years how ours had also penetrated theirs to the point where it's just almost kind of like a natural adoption, you know. So that has excited me. But it showed for me, back to the advertising industry, if the advertising industry was more deliberately tweaked into things that celebrate us, that draw on our, on originality, because whether it's the branded content guys we're talking about, or back to the Love Wantinte one, or even Hollywood itself, that it is actually in the authenticity of it that we've been able to carry what we have local and able to make that global. So where I'm going with that is, what can that journey be to also make Nigeria's advertising, because we're certainly not there, Nigeria's advertising, given what the last 2 years have shown, originality, blah, 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 what can we do to make that also become like a global phenomenon where the ads we do, maybe one day can become global references?
So far, so good. The pandemic put like a stop to some things, truly. But it also showed us platforms where we should consider, and the kind of content we should consider on those platforms. Have we been trying before as the industry? Yes, we have. Let's not forget the very memorable Airtel ads, from the one with Sia Rainbow and Dimeji Lateef, the one with Gabriel Afolayan, and then the one with the Dimeji and Lateef family. It was a direct correlation from what you said, from us taking what exists within the Nollywood space, being deliberate about how we crafted the content to suit the brand and not lose the brand from that, and then taking some bit of our local music and adding it to that. The journey had started from there, but it had also started from solving the client's problem first, generating the right kind of approach to their marketing challenges before we then go into the communication. So once we fixed this problem, it was easier for us to then tell relatable stories. And we see how music, how movies, how art has impacted the Nollywood and even the music industry in Nigeria. So it means that we have to go back to that time where we, as advertising practitioners, are able to be intentional about what kind of content we are creating and why we are creating those content. The creative minds that come up with these amazing campaigns have to come back to life. The Airtel ads one local and global awards. It won the Epica, it won the Quick Crystal, it was nominated for Cannes because it was a relatable story. Not just from an African context, but also from a global context. It was a story about a child who bought a gift for his mom, and the mom went on praying endlessly for him. That
was a long prayer.
That was a very long prayer, trust me. If you were fortunate to see the original 2-minute video, it was long.
I saw it.
It was long. But I think we're at the stage where, for me, it's about letting... And every time I use the word customer, I'm always careful to remind ourselves that we are the customers. So it's not some guy sitting somewhere. It's us. Because you talked about the kind of content you gather from different parts of the world when you travel. Yeah. You do that because you're also very interested in how content is being formed. So it means that if we're able to really take time, study trends, study how people are relating to different type of content, it becomes even more difficult because we find ourselves in a world where the people we are selling to are in the creator economy space. They create the content themselves. So maybe we study them, and possibly, I still believe so much in co-creation. Bring them into the fold and create with them. It's not from an influencer marketing standpoint or from a user-generated content standpoint. It's more of a co-creation standpoint where we both create this content together for a particular purpose, whether it is for social impact or whether it is for sales or whether it is just for brand awareness. And we are deliberate about how we want to push that. But perhaps the most important element, once we've ticked the concept of the agency and the concept of the consumer collaborating, is the concept of the client accepting those things. Because you and I know that it comes to a point where we've created something amazing and our beloved client says, no, this isn't what I want. Yeah. And so the minute where there's a proper integrated structure between what the client wants, what the agency is bringing to the market and to the field, and what the customer is telling us, and we're allowing that insights, those trends, those data to guide both parties, or all three parties in this case, then it helps us to create better stories. It helps us to leverage what we have. I sat down yesterday watching YouTube, and I was on YouTube Music, and I spent 30 minutes watching music done by our beloved Igbo brothers. And I said to myself, Fino, Flavor, Larry Gaga, and the rest of it. And I said to myself, it feels like my brothers have come to the conclusion that, Nigeria can bond for all we care. We are going to have fun. And I'm watching them celebrate culture. It was their hometowns, their villages, everything about themselves. And it made me feel like I watched a 15-minute documentary of the eastern part of Nigeria, just from music. And that came from this new song, Egedege, or something like that, and one other song, Levels. These are things that musicians are guiding us and are teaching us. So we will have to take lessons from them. We will have to improve on how we craft this content and then see what the right channels to put it at. Bring the client into the mix, make sure that we are co-creating together with them. Yeah. So it's not like they give us a brief and we go off on a tangent. We come together, we work together to create this thing and then give it to the customer who was part of that journey anyways, and we're able to deliver and reach those heights. And I think we can.
My biggest takeout the last 2 years has been, coincidentally, it's been the last 2 years that I kind of returned to the country. So I think, whereas I used to kind of look at it from the outside, I think it's forced me to look at a lot inside. Yeah. And I made the point about Hollywood as a beacon, if you like. In that period, I'd seen a few Nigerians feature on Coming to America. Yeah. And people acted like it's no big deal. that had amazed me. Exactly. I would have thought if Nigerians were going to be in Coming to America, it was going to be on the billboard somewhere. Almost like you're going to campaign that. I've been amazed how that has almost happened like it was just a walk in the park.
It was natural.
Like almost like our standard was actually maybe even higher than that.
Exactly.
And that was no big deal.
You compared that to King of Boys, for instance.
So it made me look at our industry differently and ask whether we have woken up to that task of taking Nigeria beyond where it is, because the advertising industry, being part of pop culture, in certain climes kind of can help define the society you actually want. True. Because you're part of storytelling in some way. So that I look at all of those areas of intervention, I've talked about music, Hollywood, all of that, and I feel they are global. They are. So whether you take it as Afrobeat as a genre, as in that's fairly established, whether you look at the quality of the Nigerian movies on Netflix. That's so well established. And I just look at our advertising industry as what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit far. Now, that might not be our fault. If the Nigerian music, for example, kept only being compared to pop music, will it ever really show up? And given that storytelling is all about context, and if storytelling in the Western world is abstract, and ours is more quite deliberate. If you go back to the story of the son who bought the mom, it didn't have a twist.
Exactly.
It really did not have it's just a narrative.
Yes,
it's just the prayer is a prayer. So to get the twist is almost when like the lady then also spoke to the announcer.
Exactly.
Was the near twist you had.
Yeah.
But that's not really a twist when the Western type commercials are brought to bear. So the originality of that, though, because that prayer from a mother to a son is true to us, and I felt that is the one thing we could put across. Though this gentleman that is on TikTok that is always waving as a way of showing, like almost like creating a new language. Like, can you see?
I've forgotten his name.
I felt like if you're African, you get that because your mom. That's the same thing as your mother.
Just showing you something,
looking you in the face, and you could relate to. And that wave is exactly that. And he has virtually created a whole language out of something
unspoken language
we can relate to because it's so common to our culture. But you take our culture out and you realize that it will be exotic to whoever didn't grow up that way. To me, it's not a big deal. All my friends look at that video and be like, please tell me what's the big deal. But it's like, it's not a big deal because you grew up like that.
But they connect with it
If
globally,
you didn't grow up like that, that's a meme. That's
on its own.
If you think about it. So that I feel there is language our advertising can have that can make it almost more. I think the word I'm looking for is ambitious.
Ambitious.
Because I feel that the other categories that we've pointed to kind of took upon themselves to define their own authenticity. We all kind of queried Hollywood when it was all about the herbalist and all of that.
Yeah, true.
And that hardly is the story now. There are better woven narratives and so on. And I feel like our advertising can do with a bit more ambition.
I think
and not just this is us, this is where we are, and let's celebrate that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that if Love Wantington can have 15 billion views, I think there is a lot more dimension that our advertising can have. I'm not saying it will have 50 billion each, but I'm saying that there are things we could do that can be so original that it resonates.
I think it's going to happen. Look, if we saw what happened with the publicity and the promotion for King of Boys, any person who was within our industry knows that there was an agency element there somewhere.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Now, with more film production companies bringing advertising agencies into the mix early on, not when the content has been finished and then you go to market. And I think Netflix kind of played a role in that. With Amazon Prime also trying to gain a foothold into Nigeria. I mean, fortunate to be very close with the filmmaking community in Nigeria, and so I get first-hand information about what's been happening lately. There's
via the Nigerian as head of content.
Wangi,
Yes.
And so there's a big tussle going on between, or there will be a big tussle that will go on between Netflix and Amazon.
Wangi's come off Mnet, so she has a deep background.
Yes, so and then Mnet's still in that mix. So there's a lot of clamor for Nigerian local content, especially film. And there's a certain standard that has been set already with your King of Boys and with your any movies within that space. So now what's starting to happen is film production companies are calling advertising agencies to be part of the brainstorm session from the beginning, because now they have more marketing budget because Netflix is going to co-produce this show or something. And so we're able to think through. And I feel like that's more of like a symbiotic relationship, because what starts to happen is we start to learn more of their process on how they create that content, and we start to take that and start adding that into how we write our own stories for our clients as well. So maybe because of our close proximity to the Nollywood space, we're able to learn more about how they create better stories, and we're able to start creating those kind of ads that take us back to the A-days of advertising when most of us were excited about this space because of the TV commercials we saw. From your Milo to Golden Mall and the rest of them. And we now get to that point where there will be a proper synergy between what the customer is creating on his own vis-a-vis what we are creating, which is more or less like an elevated version of that. And the minute we try to stop being viral, which is the brief you get most of the time, and just try to create content that is relatable, relevant, has twist to it, and surpasses whatever it is that we've done before, we get better with it. On a final note, you were right about people not being concerned about the all coming to America thing, because at that point in time, there were a lot more local content that was being created that we were excited about, that was being put on Netflix, and it looked like bigger deal for us. And we have to give kudos to the guys who are doing it. So there's going to be a lot of partnerships. There's going to be a lot of integration that needs to happen, where film content producers, music content producers, advertising agencies work collaboratively with the customer to determine the kind of content that will be best served. And then with the client as well, we're able to then, once we've solved the problem of marketing, from a communication standpoint, we then look at how do we take this thing and make this message, serve it in a way that the customer easily understands. And I think, like you said, it's been, 2-3 years? We're still in the early days. The only thing is we just have to be deliberate about it and put proper structure to this thing and see what happens between now to 2025.
Great.
Yeah.
With that being said, it's a good place to wrap up. We could talk about this forever because it's obviously Nigeria and it's something we're passionate about, and we want to see it a lot better. So I'd like to thank you.
Thank you very much
for coming to share your point of view with us. If listeners want to follow you, where can they reach you?
My Instagram handle is @Bakare.
Okay.
And it's the same on the defunct Twitter. But it's Bakare Adepoju.
Twitter will come back.
Amen. Soon.
At some point.
Yeah. But Instagram is easier to reach me, @Bakare.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I can be reached on Instagram on Dele Odugbemi. Thank you again. The budget has been very enlightening, and we look forward to receiving you again.
For sure.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.